The following story is inspired by true events. Some names and details have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. In the heart of London, where history and the future collide in a cacophony of stone and glass, a tower rises like a glass needle piercing the gray sky. It is called the Shard, a proud symbol of wealth, a modern fortress protected by layers of invisible and tangible security. But to the outside world, the 27th floor of this tower was a mystery. It was not an office, nor was it a restaurant. It was an isolated kingdom, and also a lavishly decorated prison, where Julian Hayes reigned in absolute solitude. At 38, Julian Hayes was a legend in the shadowy world of cybersecurity, a ghost. It was rumored he could walk through the most formidable firewalls like a breeze, that his lines of code could control the flow of information for an entire city. He was a genius, a mind worth billions. But ironically, that extraordinary mind was imprisoned in a skull filled with fear. Julian suffered from agoraphobia, the fear of public spaces, to a degree that modern medicine could only shake its head at. For 1,825 days, he had not breathed the air outside his apartment. His world had shrunk to a few hundred square meters, yet it was connected to the globe by high-speed fiber optic cables. He lived like a reclusive king. Meals from Michelin-starred restaurants, fine vintage wines, the latest computer components fresh from Silicon Valley, all were delivered to his door. The procedure was always the same. The delivery person would place the package on the mat, knock gently 3 times, and leave immediately. Julian, from inside, would watch through a micro camera, wait exactly 10 minutes to ensure the hallway was completely empty before cracking open the armored door and pulling the outside world in. His kingdom was a space of contrasts. The vast living room, with its floor-to-ceiling glass walls, displayed the entire panorama of London like a glittering carpet at his feet. But Julian rarely looked out. He lived mainly in his study, a high-tech cave with 6 enormous monitors that constantly glowed with green lines of code. The air in the room was thick with the smell of hard-working machinery and the silence of a laboring mind. He was a voluntary prisoner, and these glass walls were both his window to the world and the limits of his existence. On the morning of Monday, April 14th, London awoke to a cold drizzle. On the ground, the city began a new work week, but on the 27th floor, an unusual silence reigned. Clara Hayes, Julian's younger sister, was his only tangible link to the outside world. She was the only person who had the security card and passcode to his fortress. That morning, she arrived as usual, carrying a few books on Roman history that Julian had requested. She smiled, a smile that was somewhat weary, but still full of hope, hoping that today her brother would talk a little more, that he would have a better day. She swiped the card. A dry beep echoed. She entered the 12-character passcode. The heavy, soundproof door clicked softly and swung open. "Julian?" She called softly, her voice echoing in the silence. "It's me. I brought you some new books, Julian." There was no answer. Normally, Julian would be in his study at this hour, but today the study door was wide open. A cold sense of unease crept up Clara's spine. She stepped into the living room. The faint morning light filtered through the rain-streaked glass, illuminating a scene she would never forget. Julian was lying on the expensive Persian rug right next to the marble chessboard he cherished. The pieces were still on the board, a game half played. His eyes, the eyes that once held an entire digital universe, were now wide, lifeless, staring blankly at the ceiling. In the middle of his cashmere sweater, a single dark bloodstain was spreading. A neat, precise, and fatal stab wound. Clara screamed, a scream swallowed by the perfectly soundproofed walls. Detective Isabella Rossi arrived at the scene half an hour later. She was a woman of small stature, but exuded a powerful energy. Her black hair was tied back in a neat bun, revealing an intelligent forehead and hazel eyes that never missed a detail. Rossi hated cases involving the elite. They were always full of dirty secrets, covered up with money and carefully polished lies. She entered the apartment, its cold atmosphere making her shiver. It felt more like a museum than a home. She signaled for the forensics team to begin their work, while she took a walk around, trying to read the story the scene was telling. "Check the security system log again," Rossi ordered a young constable. "Checked it 3 times, ma'am," he replied, his voice tinged with confusion. In the last 48 hours, only one access was recorded. Miss Clara Hayes's card, at 9:02 this morning. No one else. The system was designed by the victim himself. It's supposed to be impenetrable. Windows? Fire escape? Windows are sealed from the inside, ma'am. This apartment has no balcony. No ventilation shafts large enough for a person to crawl through. It's a sealed box. Rossi approached the body. She put on gloves and knelt. The victim died from a single stab wound. There were no signs of a struggle. Everything in the room was strangely neat. She glanced at the chessboard. The pieces were made of exquisitely carved white and black marble. White, played by Julian, was in a dominant position, poised for checkmate in just 2 more moves. It seemed Julian was waiting for a move from his opponent, an invisible opponent. "Where's the weapon?" Rossi asked. "Not found, ma'am. The killer took it with them." Rossi stood up, crossing her arms. A sealed box with a dead body and a missing murder weapon. She looked out the window, down at the bustling city of London below. How do you kill a man who has locked himself away from the world? And how does the killer vanish into thin air? The investigation began, like peeling an onion, layer by layer, and it brought tears to the eyes. The first and most obvious suspect was Clara Hayes. In the interrogation room, she sobbed, a pitiful picture of grief. But Rossi had seen too many tears to be moved. "Miss Hayes, you managed all of your brother's finances, correct?" Rossi began, her voice gentle but firm. "Yes, he couldn't do it himself. He trusted me. I just wanted to help him." "A very generous help. According to the records, you've conducted transactions worth millions of pounds under his name. And you are also the sole heir to his entire estate?" Clara looked up sharply, her red eyes flashing with indignation. "What are you implying? That was my brother. I loved him more than anything in this world." "Love is a complicated thing, Miss Hayes. Sometimes it's a burden. You've spent the last 5 years taking care of him. You had no life of your own. Did you ever feel tired? Never, Clara insisted, but Rossi noticed a very slight clenching of her hand under the table. The second suspect was Dr. Alastair Finch, a respected psychotherapist from Harley Street. He conducted therapy sessions with Julian via video call. During his interview, he appeared professional and calm. Julian was a special patient, Dr. Finch said, his face appearing on Rossi's laptop screen. He was a genius imprisoned by his own fear. He was constantly paranoid, believing that invisible forces were trying to steal his work. He called them ghosts in the machine. Do you think these ghosts were real, Doctor? To Julian, they were very real. His mind was a battlefield, but physically, he was completely safe in his apartment. That was his paradox. But these ghosts were not entirely a figment of his imagination. The Met's cybercrime unit, after days of struggling, finally broke through the first layer of protection on Julian's system. They discovered a relentless cyber war between Julian and a rival hacker nicknamed Nix. They were fiercely disputing the ownership of a groundbreaking AI code, a tool that could predict global security breaches. A tool that could shift the balance of power in the digital world and was worth billions. "I will destroy you, Hayes," one encrypted message from Nix read. "You will never see the light of day with that invention." A clear threat, a clear motive. But when the tactical unit raided an apartment in Manchester, they found only a skinny 20-year-old IT student sitting amidst a pile of pizza boxes. He was arrogant, defiant, but had an unshakable alibi. At the time of the murder, he was participating in an online programming competition watched by thousands. Nix was just a pawn, a smokescreen elaborately created to hide a much more dangerous enemy. Days passed. The case hit a dead end. The media began calling it the impossible penthouse case. The pressure mounted on Detective Rossi. She sat in her office late one night, staring at a whiteboard covered in notes, photos, and red lines connecting them. "We're chasing ghosts," she muttered to herself. "We're lost in the victim's digital world. But he died in the real world. The killer was there, in the flesh. He breathed the same air as the victim. He must have left a trace." She picked up her phone. "Sergeant Davis," she said, her voice resolute. "I want you to do something. Let's go back to basics. Review all security footage from the entire Shard building for the last 72 hours, second by second. I want to know every single person who entered and left that building, their reason, and where they went." It was a seemingly insane order. Hundreds of hours of footage from dozens of cameras. A tedious job that could take weeks. But Rossi's team, trusting her intuition, got to work. They watched footage of businessmen, tourists, cleaning staff, delivery people, an endless stream of humanity. After 3 sleepless days, a young constable shouted, "Ma'am, look at this!" On the screen, a man in the uniform of a food delivery service called Quick Eats entered the building. He wore a baseball cap that obscured most of his face. He looked normal, but something was off. He didn't go to the reception desk or the delivery area. He went straight to the residence elevator. The elevator log showed he went up to the 28th floor, 1 floor above Julian's apartment. He was up there for exactly 7 minutes, then came down and hurriedly left the building. His face, under the cap, though fleeting, was etched with extreme tension. A glimmer of hope. Rossi had them investigate Quick Eats. They had no employee matching that description. The uniform was a fake. At the same time, another investigation team, digging into the private lives of the suspects, discovered a shocking truth. Dr. Alastair Finch, the respectable therapist, was massively in debt to illegal gambling syndicates. He was on the verge of bankruptcy. And then, the final twist emerged from phone records, a detail that had been missed in the initial investigation. Rossi stared at the report on her desk, her heart pounding. Dr. Alastair Finch and Clara Hayes, they didn't just know each other. They called each other 17 times in the week before the murder. And GPS tracking shows they met secretly at a cafe in Notting Hill. The curtain of mystery was suddenly lifted. Detective Rossi summoned both Clara and Dr. Finch to the interrogation room at the same time. She wanted to see their reactions when they faced each other. Clara entered, still wearing a mask of grief. Dr. Finch followed, trying to maintain his professional composure, but his eyes darted around nervously. Rossi said nothing. She just silently placed a thick file on the table between them. On top was a still from the security footage, the blurry image of the fake delivery man. "Dr. Finch," Rossi began, her voice as cold as ice. "You said Julian was paranoid, but the truth is, he was on the road to recovery, wasn't he? Your therapy notes, which we just obtained a warrant for, show that." "He told you he felt ready to step outside for the first time in 5 years." Dr. Finch swallowed hard. His composure began to crack. Rossi turned to Clara. "And that terrified you, Miss Hayes. Because if Julian recovered, he would regain control of his finances. He would check his own bank accounts, and he would discover that the two of you had been embezzling millions from him over the years to pay off Dr. Finch's gambling debts." "No!" Clara shrieked, her voice shrill. "That's a lie! You have no proof!" "Oh, but we do," Rossi said, flipping to another page in the file. "We have the bank statements, we have the call logs, and we have the testimony of this man." She pushed the photo of the delivery man towards them. "We found him, a hired debt collector that Dr. Finch knew. He confessed to everything in exchange for a deal. This locked room mystery was never a mystery at all," Rossi continued, her voice hardening, "because the killer didn't need to break in. He was invited in." She stood up, walking around the table, her voice like a final judgment. "You both knew Julian would never open the door to a stranger, but he would trust his doctor. You, Dr. Finch, turned his final therapy session into a death sentence. You convinced Julian that this was an exercise to face his fear, that he had to open the door himself to a trusted delivery person you had arranged. A great step forward in his recovery." A flashback played in everyone's mind. The image of Julian, with a hint of hesitation but full of hope, walking towards the door. He took a deep breath, temporarily disabled the security system, and with a trembling hand, he opened the door that had imprisoned him for 5 years. He smiled at the man standing outside, a smile of triumph. And then that smile froze as a cold blade plunged into his chest. The delivery man stepped in, did his job quickly, and left with the weapon. The security system re-engaged automatically after 5 minutes, leaving no trace in the log. A perfect plan built on the most ruthless betrayal. Clara Hayes slumped over the table, her sobs no longer of grief, but of defeat. Dr. Finch sat motionless, his face as white as a sheet. The game was over. The final scene, a few weeks later. Detective Rossi returned alone to the apartment on the 27th floor. It was now clean, but still retained a cold atmosphere. She walked to the chessboard. The pieces were still there, a game forever unfinished. White was just 2 moves from victory. She looked out the window. London glittered at night, a world of freedom, vibrancy, and color. A world that Julian Hayes had almost reached. He had died on the very threshold of his freedom, killed by the very people he trusted most. Rossi sighed. They say home is the safest place, but sometimes the strongest walls are built of trust. And when that trust is betrayed, no luck, no security system is strong enough to keep the devil out. Sometimes the devil is already inside, smiling and saying he only wants to help. She turned her back on the magnificent view and walked out of the apartment, leaving the kingdom in the sky to its eternal silence. The case was closed, but its echo would linger forever.